let's get into it. Obviously, the fight with Jack Catterall over the weekend didn't go the way you wanted. You're not happy about it. Why?
Yeah, I think it was a close fight. Jack's a stand-up guy, he got the decision, and I'm not gonna argue with how the rounds were at that stage in the fight, because it was a fight where I went into it with the tactics to make him miss early and maybe be behind on the cards and get to him later in the fight. So I can't argue with the decision at that point. Maybe I was 4-2 down on the scorecards. The plan was to come into the fight. I feel like I was doing that. It got cut short by the cuts, and I'm not going to argue with that decision. So,
do you accept that tactically, now when you look back on it, you may have got that wrong because you started the fight holding your feet? You're both counter-punchers, so I understand it. He was trying to draw the leads and whatnot. But Jack Catterall is a master of that, and he gets into a rhythm and he's very difficult to beat. You not stepping in with your shots in the first, let's say, 3 rounds, cost you those rounds. And when you started stepping in, hence the cuts, because you both had those clashes there, do you think tactically you got it wrong?
Yeah, 100%. I think Jack Catterall is a world-class operator, and he's very good at what he does. Very good at staying just out of distance and trying to counter you coming in. I felt like I was making him unsure of when to throw, and gaining success as the rounds went on. But if I would have anticipated the cuts and it being a shorter fight, I definitely would have gone and stepped to him earlier. But foresight is something we don't always have. So,
obviously your uncle was very visible and said a lot of things. Have you spoken? Why wasn't he at the fight on Saturday?
He really wanted to be there, but he was doing. He had a project in Jamaica with Lennox Lewis.
Right.
So he told me previously that he couldn't make it, and he was disappointed that he couldn't be there, but. He wanted to be there if he could have.
You talked about, I listened to something you did with one of the digital guys about a narrative being created around the fight. And also this, I think your uncle had suggested to you that you've got to go and win this fight, because if you're going to go into this backyard, there's a Eubank bias. I have to say, with all due respect, Harlem, I think that's not true. I think the reasons why you got a Jack Catterall fight is because of the Eubank name, so I think the Eubank bias works the other way to some extent. But what did you mean when you were talking about a narrative? I listened to the commentary from Sonny Edwards, I listened to Darren Barker, I listened to Adam Smith. I didn't think there was anything particularly controversial in what they were saying, but you were sort of alluding to an unhappiness about an underlying narrative being built around you and this fight and the outcomes.
No, I have nothing bad to say about any of the commentary during the fight. I was purely talking about, I haven't watched the fight back yet. I like to leave it a little bit of time so that as a fighter, you remove the emotion from what's actually going on in the ring. So I tend to leave it a little while before I watch the fight back. But I was purely just talking about, in that situation, I'm lying down in the medical room. I've got Jack Catterall next to me. My eyes being stitched up, his eyes being stitched up. And, I'm looking at 2 commentators launching...
Being Carl Frampton and Tony Bellew.
Carl Frampton and Tony Bellew launching personal attacks at me for no reason, which I didn't understand. I think that links back to maybe what my uncle was talking about in the Go Along, Get Along gang, sending Conor, who is not a part of their team, into my dressing room.
What does that mean in specific terms? Because I heard you say it a couple of times yesterday in the interview, or directly after the fight, which I watched yesterday. The Go Along, Get Along gang. What does that mean?
People that go along to get along, they're...
Who are they going along with?
It's an organisation, and, it's the team that they're with, trying to make people happy, sending someone that is, an alleged drug cheat into my changing room to inspect if there's any cheating going on. It's humorous.
You mean Conorbenn came in before the fight?
Yeah. And playing them type of games,
I don't like that either, do you, Spence? I didn't like Billy Joe Saunders going into...
I don't agree with it.
I think it's nonsense.
If you're not part of the team, then you should not be allowed to go into the other guy's dressing room. And we knew what it was. We knew exactly what that was, with the whole Conor Benn trying to get into your head, etc., etc. What was said in the dressing room when the cameras weren't there. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, well, it's a shame. My coach actually sent out the cameras, but I wish that the cameras would have stayed in there, because I was questioning this guy. He was wearing a chain, a big gold not guilty chain. Now, innocent people don't do them type of things. It's guilty people that have to go above and beyond to try and display innocence on their neck like that. But
did it affect you at all, like in any way, like him being in the dressing rooms?
I actually enjoyed it, and I told him, go and take a ringside seat, because I plan on going in there and executing a game plan that I had. And we was notified just before that he was, it was rumored that he wanted to come in, and I enjoyed actually him being in there, and I questioned him. I questioned him on his chain, on his documents, and on his clearance. And he didn't like it.
I'm sure that's not quite what he wanted.
He definitely didn't like it. And, he tried being all friendly in the dressing room, and as soon as he went out, he, as you see on the cameras, was shouting, his head's gone, his head's gone. And if you see the clip of me, I'm very kind of relaxed, warming up to go into the biggest fight of my life.
Also, you wasn't happy with Cole Frampton going into that opposite dressing room either, was you? Did that sort of affect you at all?
I just think you have to be neutral. If you're commentating on a fight, you can't be giving advice and in a changing room and friendly with the other side.
It makes you a little bit less impartial, doesn't it? You've got a vested interest. I mean, the fact of life is you get football commentators that play for Liverpool and they comment on Liverpool. So I perhaps you probably shouldn't take that much offence, but I understand why.
It was more the comments in terms of,
after the fight.
After the fight. Yeah. It was more the comments after the fight. And in my interview, when I was referencing the commentary, I was directly referencing, lying down, being stitched up, and hearing that attack, being launched in.
Where were you on the referee stopping the fight? Because we were obviously watching, myself and Spencer, and trying to work out backwards. And first of all, I think Bob Williams is a very good referee, and we've actually had discussions about in the past where we think Bob should actually stop fights a little bit earlier. So we think this was a very good decision. We think that, in fact, I think we agree, Spence, that the doctors perhaps let him down a little bit in terms of not making the decision for him, allowing the fight to go on, and he stepped in and made the decision and said, "That's it. I'm not having this." Were you fully in favour of what was going on at the time, and were you comfortable with it, or were you like, hang on?
I think it's. I was just saying to Spence earlier as well. I think when the referee, he sees the cuts, he sees how bad the cuts were, especially Jack's, because I got the cut. I was cut about 20 seconds before Jack, and I told Bob Williams, as I was kind of coming out being tied up, that clash was ahead, just to let him know. And then 20 seconds later, as Spencer said, when the fight was warming up and we was both getting into the exchanges, Jack, we both come in with shots and Jack got cut worse. So Bob seeing that, I think he made the right call. But in doing that, it wasn't clear to everyone what was going on at the time. My doctor approved my cut. His team, his doctor, I think approved his. Yeah. So it was pretty unclear to everyone, and I think it was the confusion.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you where the controversy surrounding this is that Bob Williams went over to Jack Catterall's corner. Yep. He checked the cut. He hated what he saw. He's an ex-fighter himself. He recognised that
he expected the doctor to say something about it.
He's taking the pressure out of his own hands and going, the doctors do your job and stop the fight. They both got cleared to continue fighting, but Bob wasn't happy with the cuts from both sides, especially Jack Catterall's, which was a horrendous cut, and the doctors should have stopped that. So he took it upon himself to overrule the doctors and stop the fight, which, in my view, was a good decision, because you're right in what you say. Bob is, he's a good referee, but he does occasionally let fights go on. He likes the fighters to have that opportunity. He likes to give them the opportunity to be able to continue. In this instance, he didn't. I think that was where the controversy was, because of Bob because the doctors have said you can fight, but he's overruled it. Yeah. And I think it was the right decision, to be fair.
Yeah, I think it was the right decision, but it just causes confusion, when when it said my corner stopped the fight, and my doctor's there like outright screaming, I didn't stop that fight. So it causes confusion and controversy. I don't think the decision was wrong. It's just the communication was unclear.
What did we learn on Saturday night, Spence, about Harlem? I mean, lots of questions about Harlem were coming into the fight. We know that Jack Catterall is a world-class operator. We know that Jack Catterall could have been and should have been an undisputed champion of the world at a weight class lower than this.
Yeah.
And there were questions, obviously, about Harlem, where he is in his career. And we'll get to Harlem, what he thinks about himself in a second.
Yep.
But what did we learn about Harlem? What did we take away?
It was always going to be a massive step up because Jack Catterall is proven. He's at that level. He should have been undisputed world champion. He's boxed at that level. We don't know where Harlem is at this point in his career. He's gone sort of been boxing under the radar a little bit, come into the public eye in the last couple of years, and it was always going to be a tough ask. And I think Harlem, and I said to him upstairs I think tactically he got it wrong because he allowed, they're two counter-punchers. Harlem was sort of like they were both feeling each other out, so you know how that's going to go. But Harlem really, when he was throwing his shots, wasn't stepping in with his feet, and that was allowing Jack just to shuffle back and hit him with those long left hands. And I think that's where the mistakes were. That was the first 3 rounds. Then Harlem has a decent 4th round, starts landing a couple of shots of his own. That's where he's stepping in. Then we get into the 5th and the 6th, and that's where we start seeing the head clashes because both guys are now committing and stepping in. They're starting to roll the dice a little bit. So the first half of the fight, for me, Jack Catterall was winning because the man to the left of me tactically got it wrong. And the second half of the fight, we don't know because of the injuries. So Jack Catterall is a world-class operator.
That's my point.
Proven world-class operator. And he's also, the difficult thing with Jack is if you allow him to get into a rhythm, like, these tricky southpaws, like Alexander Usyk as well, you allow these guys to get into a rhythm, it's very difficult to break that rhythm. And I think tactically you going in there and thinking, right, I'm going to take him into the second half of the fight and do that, you're allowing him to get that momentum, which... it's not the right decision because you go now, you're always playing catch-up. And when you're playing catch-up, you make fundamental mistakes because you take opportunities, take chances that maybe you shouldn't be taking. Yeah. And I think that's what you learn from here because you're now for the first time, forget the Tyrone McKenna victory, which was a good victory, it's at its level, it's at British sort of level. Now you're stepping into world class and you realise they're gulfs apart. And I think that's probably what you've taken from that fight.
Do you think you're at world level now?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. I felt, I was behind in the rounds, but I felt comfortable in the fact that I was getting closer to him as the rounds were going on. And it was, a great experience to be in there with someone that level because you can think you're at a certain level, but it's not until that you're in the ring with someone that you know where you are.
It's interesting. Steve Bunton was talking about it yesterday, I think, saying that he thinks that you're going to get a world title shot somewhere along the line. You're going to be at that level sooner rather than later. So that's some encouragement for you. If how do I rephrase this? I was going to say I don't think you're going to get a rematch. Let me ask you: is there a likelihood of getting a rematch, or if you don't get a rematch, what's going to be next?
I'd like the rematch, and I said to his team before the decision was announced because I feel like. At that time, it was unclear. And I said to all his team, we can run it back. But,
Sam Jones says there's no chance of that.
Well, if that's it. If they don't want the rematch, then I'll go my way and he can go his. He's a stand-up guy. He's a great fighter. I respect him, and I'm sure he'll go on.
With
due respect to the company that I'm in, I don't want to see a rematch.
No, I think stylistically it didn't gel.
Yeah.
It was not an attractive fight to watch. It was, you got 2 counter punches there. When you get that, it's more of a chess match, and it's not a sort of fight that you would want to sort of relive. And I don't think the public would really, call for that fight.
So if not Jack, where likely next?
We'll see what's available at world level. I feel like I've tasted it now, and I want to go in there at world level and prove myself. And I wish Jack all the best in his career, and we can both go our separate ways. And
I've learnt something from it.
Yeah, most definitely.
Absolutely.
Most definitely.